And thank you so much for taking the time to come out this evening. We really appreciate it. My name is Karen Olmstead, and I have the privilege of serving as the provost or the academic vice president here at Salisbury University. And I'm being joined by my colleague.
My name is Alyssa Carr. I'm Associate Vice President and Director of Marketing and External Relations at University of Maryland Eastern Shore.
So we're going to kind of give you an overview of what we're going to talk about here this evening, but what I thought might be a treat is if you're a radio listener like I am, you know a lot of names, but you don't know the faces that go with those names. So I thought if we can start in the back, maybe people who work at WSM and DPR, if you could just raise your hand and say who you are so we can put a name with the face.
You're killing Yancey right now. He does not want to be recognized.
All right, recognize that voice.
Who do you want to be today, Angel? Okay.
Chris. Annie. Did I miss anybody?
Anybody else?
And then I wonder, I saw Dr. Nagel here, if you want to just representing the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, and are there other friends here that like to raise their hands just so people know to connect? If you want to just go ahead and give your names so people know who you are. Yeah. 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 Great. Welcome. Anybody else?
Thank you for coming.
Anybody else? Great. All right. Well, thanks again. As I said, thank you for coming out, and we really appreciate your time and the opportunity for you to give input. There's a sign-up sheet back there and also a short survey if you want to take a minute to fill that out on your way out. So for those of you, I know I recognize several faces that have been at previous meetings for DPR anyway. We've talked about how this is a changing environment for radio generally, and a really changing environment for public radio in particular. And that's something that we at DPR are grappling with, and our friends at WSM are certainly grappling with as well. So we have been talking, and we see a collaboration as a potential way for us to address our current and inevitable future challenges. That doesn't seem like the environment, we'll dig into that more in a few minutes, for radio is going to change in a way that it's going to make it a lot easier to do what we do. So collaborating seems like a good way to approach that. We're both public institutions. We're both parts of the University System of Maryland. So we both report up to a shared board of regents. So in that way, we're very similar. But in another way, we're very different. We have very different missions in terms of the histories of our institutions. At Salisbury University, where our roots are as a normal school, as a teaching institute or an institution for teachers, and we're a public comprehensive university where UMES is a land grant institution, lots of agriculture, engineering, and also has a proud heritage as a HBCU or a historically black college or university. And so we see that maintaining those identities both on our campuses but also through our radio stations is a really important goal for us in this project. We don't want it to just become a big mixing pot where there aren't any identities that are maintained. So that will be something that we'd like to focus on. We're going to dive into this more deeply in terms of what a benefit of a kind of umbrella structure that's shared or collaborative or an alliance might look like, but I'm just going to give you what we're thinking right off the top of our head, so you can say, oh, I'm going to have a question about that, or I want to dig into that a little more deeply so I can understand how there might be some benefit from this type of a collaboration. So one is the more efficient use of the incredibly technical skills and leadership skills that are required in a running a radio station, especially a public radio station. So we'll dig into that. We both have very small staffs and trying to make most efficient use of those human resources. We're hoping that we have more effective use with respect to fundraising and selling underwriting by having basically a bigger product to sell, by having 3 stations to sell instead of just 2 or just 1, going up against the behemoth that of course is WAMU in our region. There are grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, both planning grants and implementation grants for these kinds of collectives. This isn't something we dreamed up that nobody else has done. This has been done in the past, and Jerry's going to talk about that in a minute, because it's viewed as a way to maximize the efficient use of your resources. We're interested in, a lot of times we hear from listeners, I love your local programming. For our DPR, we love Don Rush. We want more Don Rush kind of stuff. And so we see this as an opportunity to share resources for local programming, local news. A lot of our news is very similar. And then along those lines, we see this opportunity as a way for us to bring our primary missions, of course, at our institutions are in the teaching of our students, as a way for us to both bring students more into our stations, whether it's for music programming or for news journalism and like marketing and fundraising. And there's that going on, but we see even more opportunity.
So beyond sort of those efficiencies that we're talking about, there's going to be the information that's coming from our presidents right now is that both of our presidents are strongly endorsing the opportunity that we see before us right now to work together and to collaborate. And really, there's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes, collaborative programming in the future for even student things that are coming up. Both of our campuses spend a lot of money and resources to help keep our NPR stations afloat, and so this, again, offers that opportunity for collaboration and some synergy there. We'll start out tonight with sort of an overview and some technical information about radio from our general manager at WESM, Jerry Weston. Jerry will talk about his experience with these kinds of collaborations at other stations. So like Karen said, this isn't something that somebody had a dream about and just woke up one day and decided it was a good idea. This is something that we've researched, that we know has been effective in other markets, and there's no reason why we can't bring it to Delmarva. Chris, the operations manager at DPR, will be talking a little bit more in depth about that changing media landscape and what's going on in radio. And Annie, development director, and Jerry will talk about sort of the opportunities that we have before us and some of the challenges that we might face. And Chris will briefly review some program alternatives, and we'll wrap up and take your feedback. And so during this time, you're going to have questions, and we want you to bring those questions to the forefront because it's something that you're thinking, it's something that possibly somebody else is thinking or that maybe we haven't thought of. So this big brain trust in this room this evening, we're looking for some thoughts from you as well.
And just to underscore that, I'm sure there are things we haven't thought of, so we're delighted to have you here to help us think of those. All right, with that, I guess, Jerry, you want to come up?
First of all, you'd think I know how to work a mic. First of all, it's a real pleasure for me to be back at Salisbury University. I spent 4 years here, 2007 through 2011. I can't believe it's been almost 8 years since I was here. And I know some things have happened since then, but here we are. And I couldn't be happier to be part of this collaboration process because I think in a number of different markets around the country, collaboration is where public radio is going. The days where we're all in our individual silos and competing against the other public radio station, those days are going away. And we ought to focus our competitiveness on some of the other things you're going to see up on our PowerPoint display, thanks to Chris in a few minutes. Some of the saturation from other competitors out there in the landscape. But we'll talk about that. Briefly, my history, I did spend 4 years in Salisbury, but I do have a lot of experience in a collaborative atmosphere in Louisville, Kentucky, where I spent most of my career. We've managed over an 8-year period to bring 3 different stations together from the Louisville Free Public Library, from the city of Louisville, and also the University of Louisville. It was a long process. It was different than what we're talking about here today. That was actually a merger into a separate nonprofit, which is not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much more simple, and I think something much more easily attained, and that's a collaboration between Salisbury University and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I can tell you, because I've had firsthand experience getting to know Ann and Chris and Chelsea and Hannah and all the great people that you have at SCL and STL, and also at WESM with Angel and Yancey and Brian and Daphne. You have 2 staffs that are incredibly dedicated to this process, dedicated to public radio, dedicated to what they do individually each and every day, and also dedicated to the potential collaboration that we could have here between all three stations. The main goal is, what are we providing the Delmarva Peninsula? That is the number one priority. Are we bringing something of high value to the peninsula? And I think all of you are listeners, and you understand that both, I should say all three, SCL, SDL, and WESM, all bring something different to the table, different strengths to the table. And we'll talk about that once the PowerPoint display gets rolling. Another example that we've been researching as far as collaboration is Iowa Public Radio, but again, that's a different scale. Iowa, 3 different universities came together in a collaborative atmosphere. It was Iowa State University, the University of Northern Iowa, and the University of Iowa. They have 26 different radio frequencies across the state, where they broadcast 3 different radio stations across 26 different frequencies. So it's a much more expansive project than what we're talking about here. But still, it's a good example that somewhere else in this great country of ours, there is collaboration going on between different public radio entities to make a better public radio experience for the listener. I think I see Rick and Charles Emery and others out there who have experienced me in the past. They know that if we're not making the listener a priority, then we shouldn't be in the business. I mean, that is the number one priority for all of us. With that, I think we're going to begin our PowerPoint display just to talk about a few things. Chris has the clicker. Go for it. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but just to refresh your memories, we are at a saturation point here on the peninsula with public radio, which is good. If you're a public radio fan, it's fabulous. You've got WESM, University of Maryland Eastern Shore. You can see WSCL. You can see WSDL circle over here. We'll talk about how that is going to work together in terms of fundraising in just a few minutes. Then you've got, who said the elephant in the room? Karen did. WRAU, which is actually WAMU. They have to use a different call letter because it's a different frequency from AMU. Little radio lingo. And up top is WDDE, which is a small station in Dover. And maybe down the road they could be part of this project as well, but we're not doing that today. That's separate, and that might be down the road. Right now we're talking about our 3 stations. But that's just an example of the public radio coverage that we have today. This is a different, I just like this picture. I don't know why, I just like that. Yeah, we took WDDD out of it, Chris did. And we'll go back to this slide in a few minutes when we talk about the potential of selling underwriting as one big superstation. Next. And as we all know, the competition is wide and it's deep and it's out there, but we shouldn't be scared of it because we know what we do and we do a good job. And we have our place in the sun, but so do all these people. I won't talk about cell phones because I work out at Planet Fitness, and if one more person sits on a machine on their cell phone without letting me work out, I'm going to go crazy. But smart speakers, Spotify, Pandora, you can create your own playlist, play your own music when you want to hear it. It's great. It's at your fingertips. XM Sirius satellite radio was what we were all deathly afraid of in the business 20 years ago when they talked about this nationwide service of jazz 24 hours and classical music and news, and how are we going to compete with that? Well, we're competing just fine, and we've survived, and we're still here. But they're still here, too, so we have to understand that and compete with it. Chris, you want to talk about Connect car dashboards? I think I'm getting too old. Yeah.
Well, the saving grace for radio for years and years and years used to be drive time radio, 6 o'clock in the evening, because you're stuck in your car and you've got your radio. I don't know if any of you bought a car in the last 3 or 4 years, but radio is not as prominent on your dashboard as it used to be. Now, if you have a car, you've got basically an entertainment system. Radio is one option among many of them, and it can be actually rather difficult to find the radio in a car these days. You know, you have to find the right button on the screen to get to it. So it's not as it's not as powerful as it used to be. The other thing I wanted to point out real quick is that the fastest, or at least I heard this, the fastest selling consumer device lately is the smart speaker. Everybody's buying Amazon Alexas and Google Home Pods and all those kind of things. The good news is you can listen to both WSCL and WSDL and WESM on a Google Alexa. You just have to say Google or Alexa play WSCL or WESM.
Yes, sir.
I would add respectfully, add to your list, smart earbuds and crossover guys, smart hearing aids, which connect to everything, including Alexa and recording music from
Sure.
Alexa, and it's like a mobile smart speaker.
Mm.
And it's all you really is.
Yeah, we live in an age where everything you want to hear is at your fingertips. Just about any music you can think of at any time of the day you can have. All right, let's dig into the weeds a little bit. This is goes back to 2002. Can everyone hear me okay? Do I really need this microphone? Oh, okay. Thank you, Angel. Is that better? I'm watching you. All right, thank you. Much better. The blue is WSCL, and that's over a 16-year period now. You can see where SCL was clearly the dominant station for years. In retrospect, it still is to a certain extent, not quite the way it was back 2002 through 2011, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. SDL, I'm not sure why, ESM's on the next slide. SDL is the red, and our friends at WAMU or RAU is the green. And I was here when this happened, so I remember it very well. It happened a year before I left. Summer of 2010 is when they went live. And you can just look at it and you can see what's happened. They have come on like gangbusters, and we have suffered. Chris, you want to go to the next slide? So SDL and WESM are very similar in terms of audience reach and number of people that we're reaching. You can see the green is still WAMU, RAU, and the blue is still WSCL. The fact is, and those of you who remember me from my Salisbury days, my complaint was, and it's still valid, that AMU is able to tap in the DC market to fund what they're doing here on the Eastern Shore. We don't have that advantage. We don't have a wealthy market. I mean, we have a good market. It's a different market, but it's not DC in the metro area that they have, and they have just a lot of different money that they can tap into to be successful. That's why they can float RAU. They don't have to worry about raising money in the Eastern Shore. They raise all their money in Metro DC, and they spend some of it to maintain WRAU. And that's just a fact. That's just the situation we're in. Next. Sure.
And you can help me out if I need it. This is a chart of our underwriting revenue from 2011 through 2018. You can see that the direction is not good. The good news is that within the last year, that is being reversed quite a bit. So it is coming back up. But we've had some serious financial challenges, partially with listenership donations coming in, and partially with underwriting donations coming in. We also at one point lost our main underwriting salesperson, so for a period of at least 4 or 5 months we were having a really hard time selling underwriting. But there it is. And again, the good news is this is being reversed as much as we can. But part of this collaboration will help us to hopefully do that, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Anything else? We've also had some, at least here at Delmarva Public Radio, we've had some membership challenges as well. On the first picture to the left, we have a rough idea of how much membership money we've been raising. You can see in 2016 we took a huge dip. And on the right side, what we calculated was the number of actual human beings who were making donations. So if you made a donation twice in 1 year, we were still counting you as one person. And you can see that 2016 was a really bad year. We had 686 people. Here.
So I just wanted to add both transitions, the underwriting salesperson and the membership coordinator at the time were in 2016, which is when you first start to see a drop off happen to both the slide previous and to underwriting and to membership.
But the good news is it's coming back up. It's not all bad. The point of this is to let you know that, yes, things are serious. So there we go. Should we keep going?
Andy told me this last week. The estimate for SDL-SCL's underwriting this year is 172,000. So it's going back up. The other issue that Chris didn't mention, but I will, is I know that SCL and SDL had some technical challenges for a long time. Nothing eliminates an audience quicker than technical challenges. How often do you stick with a radio station that is kind of fuzzy? Maybe
Roughly around 2016 when we got the new transmitters that both Roxanne and Keeper. So there was a period in around 2015 to 2016 where we were going off the air quite a bit.
yeah, and that hurts. That hurts, but they're coming back. Benefits. What are the benefits? This is what I find interesting from a management perspective. Our two staffs have strengths in different areas. This is why I think collaboration makes a whole lot of sense, especially for these two staffs, ironically, it's very simple. On the Salisbury side, you've got a development staff, a full-scale development staff, plus traffic, plus business office, plus Dawn Rush, and programming. We know, and Chris is doing a great job in operations, but you've got a full-scale development staff. We have none of that at WESM. We do not have a development staff. We don't have an underwriting salesperson. We don't have a development director. We don't have a marketing person. We miss that. On our side, we have something that SCL and SCL do not have, and that's live hosted music programs. And we are a very committed music station. Obviously, jazz is our #1 commitment as far as music is concerned, but we also do R&B, and we do blues, and some other music as well. But in radio, having a live host makes a huge difference when you're doing music, a huge difference. Being local is very, very important. And I would say the same thing for classical music. And I know we got away from classical music hosts on WSCL. I'd like to work to try to get that back. Live hosted music. It makes a big difference for the audience. But we also have operations. You need operations. We've got the GM. And we've got a person to take care of our website and do a little bit of marketing for us. Brian Daniels couldn't be here tonight, but that's what he does. But again, our Yancey, Angel, Brian, and Molly, whom we have on Fridays, are all live hosts. And we're talking about bringing that live host to WSDL, live hosted radio to WSDL. Next. So, not to draw this out too long, because I know you're going to have questions, but I am a big believer that, could we go back to that underwriting slide? Could you find that? No, the map. That one. Yeah. My fave. Think of us selling underwriting right now. You've got me selling underwriting for WESM. You've got Hannah Fadwa selling underwriting for SDL, SCL. Think of what we can do if we talk to companies and tell them that buying one announcement is going to cover the entire Delmarva Peninsula. Because what you're seeing here are the primary signals. You're not seeing the whole signal. ESM actually goes down to here and goes across to southern Maryland. SCL, I had to drive to Philadelphia a few weekends ago. I caught SCL past the Delaware Memorial Bridge. So you've got the entire northern part of the peninsula. We've got it covered with these 3 stations. For any regional business that wants to seriously get their marketing message out on the Delmarva Peninsula, they're going to have to buy our 3 stations. And with this collaboration, they'll be able to do that. And I firmly believe that's going to help the finances of both STL, SCL, and WESM in a big way. That requires good sales. That requires someone getting out there and telling people what we are and what we're doing and making sales. So it takes work, but I think we have a lot better opportunity to do that when we work together rather than competing with each other. Next. Oh. That should not just be funding for WESM, that should be lifting the boat for everybody. Okay, number 2, we want to raise the listener contribution level funding for all 3 stations, not just WESM, but obviously ESM is going to benefit from the marketing and more listeners that we do attract. Cross-promotion, this is big in Louisville. In Louisville, we were able to cross-promote the classical music station on our alternative music station and our news station. We were able to cross-promote the news station on the classical station. And we'll be able to do that with our 3 stations here, and SDL talking about SCL, SCL talking about WESM, because we all know that classical music listeners, a lot of them also like jazz, and news listeners like classical and jazz, and cross-promoting all 3 stations on all 3 stations just makes a lot of sense from a management point of view, and raising awareness, listenership, and hopefully programming all the formats. We're still committed to our formats, okay? We know that WSCL is still the dominant station. It's still the biggest public radio hybrid entity in the country. News and classical music is still the #1 format for public radio stations, although news has really come on over the last 15, 20 years. But news and classical is very, very important to the success of this collaboration. Nothing's going to happen at WSCL. Okay, except make it better, maybe. This is also a big one for all of us, and me too. Students. You've got 2 of the great universities on the peninsula. We've got students, communication students. We need to utilize these kids. We need to get them interested in the business. At one point, we had news interns at WSDL. If that's not happening, we want to do that again. We want to reinvigorate that and get young people into the radio station somehow. Interns, news interns, marketing interns. If we don't take advantage of the student population, then we're doing something wrong. We've got to do that. Alyssa has heard me say that in our meetings for weeks and weeks. And obviously the #1 goal is raise the listenership for all the stations. Not just marketing will help that, but everyone doing a better job on the radio will help make that happen. Because we're going to get some publicity out of this, we know that. But if we get publicity and we don't sound good, it doesn't matter what publicity we get, because nothing's going to happen. But I think, is there another one? Am I missing? We didn't want this to be a 2-hour presentation. We wanted it to be fairly quick. I know we've thrown a lot at you, but we're very excited about the potential of this. And I think it's time that these 3 stations really walked hand in hand and try to make a go of it. Questions, Bill?
Why not go all the way and make a nonprofit corporation out of the 3
I get paid the big. Well, don't sit down. That might be something that we grow towards, but that we hold these licenses. That UMES holds a license. We hold 2 licenses. I think we want to see if we can walk before we can run, for sure. And if it works this way, maybe there's no need to form that. We also, just as universities, have fundraising goals and that we can count in terms of the university invests, SU invests about $250,000 a year just in cash into the stations. We'd like to be able to credit some of the fundraising to our overall picture as well. So, that's an idea, but I think the walk before we run might be a good model. If I could just back up a little bit, Jerry, I was just thinking about this, just to give you an idea of what we are thinking about as an umbrella structure, and on the surveys that were over there, there's some potential names. So maybe something like Delmarva Public Media might be the umbrella structure under which these 3 radio stations operated, so they'd retain their identities. I think we might mix up the programming on WSDL. That might be the one that we tweak the most, because it seems like we have a lot of very dedicated listeners to the other 2 stations, but it'd be important to us to have those stations retain their identities in terms of classical or jazz.